Mm. Okay, so let's move on to one of the key questions over here, which is like, what's the difference between a product designer and a UX designer? I know the answer to that question, but I think maybe it'll be nice for you to like explain to our audience here, because your title is actually a product designer. It's not a UX designer. What do you, after experiencing it for 1.5 years, what do you think is the
I think,
definition?
yeah, product designers and UX designers, it's one of the most commonly confused title, right, in the design industry. Like, oh, when do I use UX? When do I use product? Or like, there's even more terms like UX, UI, or like web developers kind of thing,
Yeah.
which related to like, product design kind of thing. But I
Mm.
know that the terms is very different in terms of like hiring managers or like sometimes companies who have very little design maturity, they will kind of confuse, what this title is kind of thing.
Mm.
So as UX designer, we are designers that design experience for users. So it's more focused in terms of like user experience. So you can think of it in a way that the first thing that UX designers think of it's the users. It's really centered around the users. Whereas in product design, being a product designer, when we design something, our primary goal is to solve the problems of the user. But in the process, we design this same experience that do the same, and we kind of bundle and package it in the form of a product. And having this in mind, we need to think of the product at large. We need to have the skill set of a UX designer, but also, how to think about how the product actually impacts the businesses. So we have like a holistic understanding of the entire system, where UX is one part of it, but we need to understand like things like the product vision, the business goals, the timeline, the strategy of how we're going to push our products, some of the technical constraints, or like even like the revenue aspects of business. So there's a lot more things to think about being a product designer, comparing it with a UX designer. So think of it in a way that you can have the best user experience when it comes in designing a solutioning, but the same experience might not be like feasible to maintain and sustain. So maybe due to the effort required, or it does not generate enough revenue for the company. So it's going to die very soon as a product. But the experience can be, fantastic, right? So yeah, I mean, as product designers, we need to understand every aspect of, building a product and make the smart trade-off between, what works and what does not work for a product.
I think that's a fair explanation. And I think you also gave us a hint earlier about a little bit about what you do more than other designers, right? Because you explained that sometimes you have to go to market, sometimes you have to think about the growth aspects of a product. Like what would you say is like that? What's that percentage of work that you have to do that's outside of creating the best user experience?
I think it really depends on the different stages of the design thinking process, or like, the different stages of your product. So I can be very heavily involved in research. I can be very heavily involved in like, the roadmap planning, or like the strategy with my PMs in the early stages when we are trying to launch a product. So I can't really say what's a good percentage, but I can say on a day-to-day basis, what we do, it's very different. There's no one day we are doing the same thing. I think there's a lot of there's a lot of things in terms of like learning curve that we need to learn from and really grow as designers.
Okay, thanks for explaining. And you've been in Xendit for 1.5 years. I know I haven't seen you a lot. I know you've grown some dark eye circles. That's all I observe physically. What is actually going on in a high growth startup?
Wow, I think right now, I think because the market is shifting also, a lot of tech layoff, as you guys are catching up with the news. So a lot of strategy is changing towards more revenue focused kind of design strategy or like product strategy. On top of that, there are multiple products. Some companies are going in a downsizing kind of reducing headcounts kind of thing. So there will be times that you will be working on multiple ad hoc projects also. So there's a lot of context switching where you need to get information for different products in terms like the users using your product. Yeah, so I mean, in a hyper growth startup, I think everything changes very fast. It's super fast paced. Things can just change
Okay.
depending on the environment also. So
what do you love about this? Like, what do you love being in a hyper growth environment?
so I think for me, I love being a product designer in a hyper growth startup because I learn a lot of things. I get to touch on all sorts of aspects of being a product designer, not just being UX focused or like user centric. I mean, that's the core of what we do, designing for users. But at the same time, we are thinking like taking in data points or like doing some data analysis to see what works and what does not work, what brings in revenue for the company, how do we grow our product, and seeing that really is very different from just being a UX designer.
Okay. And what do you not enjoy so much about being in a hyper growth company?
I think because for me, I work kind of in silos in my product team. So there's not much collaboration with other designers unless your project or product touches on a surface of other product designers' product. So like let's say for me, if I need to work with onboarding for my product, so I will work with the onboarding product design kind of thing. So that's the only rare instances that you get to work with other designers. But mainly you're heading from the end-to-end process. So more or less your time will be taken up just working on your product alone. In terms of like design processes, it's not fixed in stone, like comparing it with large companies who have their design process in place. And as a design team, we are still figuring out how to go about working together, collaborating with different teams, bring the best experience for our users, designing in a way that it's standardized across all of our products. So I think that is one thing that really is different from working in a more mature kind of company that it's like your FANG companies.
It sounds to me like it's very fluid, and I do remember that you told me once before that you really like the people you work with because they're so smart.
Yeah.
it feels like I think in the first couple of months you felt like an imposter, but then I say, hey dude, you already got hired, so just go through with it. So what has been your first 3 months like in the company?
First 3 months I was struggling very badly because first I don't know anything about payment gateways. I needed to gain a lot more context in terms of like what I was building. I needed to understand the users. I need to understand what's the business goals. I needed to even understand what a product designer do, because at that stage I was just relatively new to the industry also, and I was just learning the ropes as I go. But in terms of that, I'm quite fortunate to be in Xendit because it kind of accelerated my growth because I was doing a lot of things. I was really wearing multiple hats and trying new things. In terms of like there's no proper processes, you can be more daring and more bold in terms of like suggesting new ideas or like creating workshops that may work for your own products. So you're taking full control and taking full charge of what you're building. And that is how, from 3 months lack of knowledge, Justin becomes, 1.5 years. I won't say a guru, but,
Yeah,
more
we
expert
always
in what I do.
we have a saying, right? Like when you work in a high growth startup, because I've been in one before, and that startup is called Razor, but not really a small startup anymore. They always have a joke, right? Like 1 year working in a startup is like 3 years working elsewhere, anywhere else, like in an MNC, in an SME, like you learn so much, right? So would you agree with that statement? Like you've been there 1.5 years, it feels like you worked 4.5 years outside.
Totally agree with that statement, because I just had a chat with my manager also. I was just telling her, it feels like I've been in the company for 5 years. It feels like I've been building my product for a very long time, because we just go through, the different quarters, year by year, and then, time passes so fast that you really lose track of um, your time being a product designer in a high growth startup. But at the same time, with that being said, as a designer in a high growth startup, you need to really take charge in terms of like your career growth, your career opportunities in your own design team, or even to really map it out on your own and be responsible for your own career.
And I think for context also, like why they say like it's 3 times the time, it's also because you work very hard, right? Like you're putting in way more hours than most people. Usually we're talking about a 50 to 60 hour work week. Is that accurate, or we're talking about more than that?
No, that's accurate. I think
Okay.
in Xendit we still have work-life balance.
Okay, 50 to 60 hours. And then what we're also talking about is rapid iteration, right? So
Yes.
every single thing you do is like it's a lot faster. So there's no like time delay from other people. That's why it feels very, very fast. Yeah.
Yep. So we work in like a sprint kind of format where, every week is a different sprint. We need to push out our designs or like reiterations in a very rapid format. So yeah, I mean,
So it's interesting because you mentioned that you have to work with PMs, but sometimes you also have to take ownership. So I'm curious, like when it comes to product thinking, when it comes to some of the things that PMs are supposed to do, because I used to be a PM myself, where do you draw the line, like with your PM? Like it sounds like you had to come up with a go-to-market plan. Shouldn't that be the PM's responsibility? Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe let's talk about, what's the scope of a PM and a product designer in Xendit first. So maybe the scope of the product manager, it's a lot wider in the sense that you need to get buy-ins from stakeholders, you need to do the selling, you need to do the marketing. Mainly you are the decision maker, whereas a product designer, you are really in more of a focus or like a deeper focus in what brings out the best experience for the customers. So in terms of like product management wise, it's really about owning that strategy, owning that roadmap, the scope of your product. You understand the data, the success metrics that you put for your own product. In terms of like the product designer role, it's more towards like helping influence the overall product and design decisions. In terms of like informing them in who our target audience is, the personas, the user flows, doing the interaction design, prototyping. I mean, there are some portions that is, if you look at it at a Venn diagram, it will be crossed together. So like things like user research and use cases and a lot of other stuff. It's both the product managers and the product designers doing the same thing. So it's really one, it's the decision maker. The other would be the influencer of the product decisions and design decisions.
I think that's a fair explanation. So you said when you joined a company, you had to really kind of train yourself to think more product. right? Instead of just being like a designer. So maybe can you help us understand, for those of us who've never built a product or managed a product before, how do you upskill yourself as a designer to be more product focused? Yeah.
I think in general, is it?
Yeah, in general, like how did you went about it, and would you encourage everyone to follow the same steps?
Yeah, so I think one thing that Julie Zhou, she's a very famous VP of design in Facebook before. She wrote Making a Manager. She mentioned this in one of the podcasts. I think it's Lenny's podcast before, saying how do you go about improving on your product thinking skills would be experience, you know, in your daily experience, observe and take notes of like the things that you use or the things that you go through in terms of like the products or the experiences that you're using on a day-to-day basis, and understand why is it built that way. Understand, you know, who the product designers or product managers are targeting, and how do they go about building it. It's like working backwards and, you know, understanding their thought process of like, oh, why did they put this button here, or like even like why did, you know, Google change some of their stuff, or like even going to a restaurant, why do they, you know, have queues in a way that it's a form in a snake format kind of thing. So all these little things really help you think about, oh, why are people doing it in this way? Then have chats with, you know, people in the field of product design, or like being a product manager kind of thing, and understand their way of thinking also. So it's really about that banter you have with other designers, other product managers, to understand, you know, what their thought process is and understand how products are being built. I think that's a very good way to really improve on your product thinking skills. Understand things like why, you know, certain features are built in that certain way. Is it to increase the revenue of the company? Is it to, you know, reduce mental load of the whole overall experience? And it will really help you, you know, push further in terms of like your product thinking, your product strategy. You know, how do you go about building a product?
Yeah, it sounds a lot like critical thinking to me, which definitely I think a lot of designers can do more to train that muscle. But I'm also aware, like when you call yourself a product designer, you're also somewhat responsible for the strategy, right? Whether it's the design strategy or whether it's the product strategy, you're somewhat a collaborator in this space. So how did you actively like build your strategic thinking or strategic mindset in this case?
Let me think for a bit.
Just kind of like looking back at your own experience. Was it through like a lot of conversations with very, very smart people, and then suddenly one day everything just clicked?
I think in Xendit, it's a very flat hierarchy, so you can really talk to anyone in the company. I think that's the pros of being in a startup also. I think you have to talk to people who are in the marketing field, or like marketing department. You need to talk to people who are in the finance department, the ops department, outside of, you know, just your product team. So you will get more understanding why are they pushing it in this way. Let's say product works closely with marketing, right, to push out a product. So you understand what's the go-to-market strategy from the marketing side, but also how can you, you know, help smoothen that entire process on the product side, to, you know, have a more holistic or more in a way well packaged product that will be pushed out in you know, the upcoming weeks or months kind of thing.
It sounds like you did a lot of extra work on your own, talking to different people within your organization and just trying to figure out what does the big picture kind of like look like as well. And I think, but wait a minute. I mean, aren't you guys all very, very busy? Like how do people still give you time and talk to you?
I think we just have to have to just talk to each other.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, so if I were to ask you again, like, you said 3 months you were struggling a lot, right? Now let's say we have someone over here who's going to join a hyper growth startup, right? And maybe they are kind of like you, right? In your first 3 months, or even like worse off. What kind of advice, or what would you tell them to do? Like, what should they be doing in their first 90 days to really do a good job and impress the people in their team?
I think set expectations in terms of like your own expectations of what you want to achieve within these 3 months, and then communicate the expectations to your manager and how he or she can actually help you, grow as a designer, or like connect you with the right people to give you that knowledge that you need to build your products. So I think that's one thing that I failed to do in my 3 months in Xendit. So I was exploring a lot on my own. I think I have that fear that I don't want to let people know that I don't know what I'm doing. So being a new person, you always want to prove that, oh, you can do it on your own. But don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to go about really setting the expectations of, or like the goals you have within these 3 months, and really communicate that to your product team in terms of like how do you go about on a day-to-day designing for a product. How do I work better with you in terms of like a designer working with a PM, a designer working with a tech lead. So once all those expectations are out, at least you know that, oh, these are some of the things that I need to work on to actually grow as a designer. On top of that, you need to really understand your product as a whole to start ramping up on your user research, start understanding the users, and then really build the product and have a lot of reiterations from there.
That's really fair. Is there anything, any book or any resources or anything that you think would be immensely helpful for someone who is going to join a team like Xendit or a hyper growth startup, or is going to be joining a big tech, fan company? Yeah, is there any resource you would point them towards?
I think there's so many resources out there, right? There's YouTube, there's Medium articles, but I wouldn't specifically say there's a one fit all kind of solutioning. So as you read all these articles, as you go through different design, have chats with different designers, everyone have their own solution of how they will do it. So in that sense, see what you can adapt to your current situation that you're in, and apply it to whatever fits your solutioning in terms of like when you're designing something or when you're going through something. But there are some good books like I have behind me. Make Time is one of a good book that helps me prioritize as a designer. There is Hooked if you're doing like B2C products. Sprint, I think, by Jake Knapp also, because we are working in sprints, right? The Lean Startup, 0 to 1 kind of thing, by Peter Thiel. There's a lot of good books out there, so I can't recommend a specific book right now.
Okay, that sounds fair. Or even ask your product managers for recommendations. Because sounds like if you're going to become a product designer, you kind of need to also think like them. So I have a question here from the audience, and Antonia over here asks, what kind of tools are you using on a daily basis? Do you have to learn a new tool when you join Xendit?
I think for tools wise, we use a lot in terms of like Figma, FigJam for brainstorming. Before FigJam was even out, we were using Miro boards. So anything that helps, communicating or like, brainstorming on a daily basis. But our main tool would be Figma for UI purposes, be it, prototyping or like wireframing or even doing the hi-fi designs at the end of the day.
Okay. Any quick comments on the acquisition of Figma?
Wouldn't want to comment, but
Sure.
not looking forward.
All right. Yeah, we're just joking. Anyway, so we have two other questions. One is, do you have a mentor within your company? Yeah.
I think mentor-wise, it's my direct manager. I think she have a strong empathy for her designers or her direct reports. So she's someone very good to talk to. If I'm facing any blockers, I go straight up to her because she is the head of design also, and she needs to ensure that the design team does well. Yeah, like what I mentioned just now. Don't be afraid to let her know, any struggles kind of thing, or let him or her know that you have you're having any struggles with your work, or you don't understand certain things. It's a lot better if you tell her, and he or she can actually address it for you, or like find different solutions that maybe you wouldn't have thought of. So it's more towards like a mentorship manager kind of role, rather than seeing it as a manager that, I think a lot of people have this perception of like, a manager only picks on you when you do, you're performing badly kind of thing. So yeah, I see it otherwise. I see it as an opportunity to grow and ask the right question to help me reach my own targets as a designer.
That's awesome. So someone also asked, like, what are the things that you find most challenging at the moment?
Most challenging at the moment, I think keeping up with the current market. I think it's more towards the macroeconomics that's happening. So there's a lot of restrictions in terms of like what you can do and what you cannot do. Some things is not within your control. So always focus on what you can control and do the best you can in terms of like, pushing our product at its best form.
Thank you. And someone asked like a general question. As a designer, do you have to keep working on your product on a daily basis? Do you all ship code daily, or what's going on?
We don't ship on a daily basis. So sometimes there will be times that we are, really understanding the users by doing interviews. Sometimes it's really about, understanding the product direction, or like how we are pushing it on the next phase kind of thing. We don't do designs on a daily basis. Like we don't do UI user interaction on a daily basis.
How long are your sprints then?
It's usually 2 weeks. Yeah.
2 weeks. Oh yeah. Okay. That sounds about right as well. Okay. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about your mentoring experience. I know that's the other part of you. And you've been mentoring on ADPlist for a while now, and you've achieved like super mentor status. Like what do you need to do to get that top 1% kind of like recognition?
I think for me, I didn't really think so much into it. I just want to genuinely help people, because back then I was struggling to even find a job in UX, right? I think I did reach out to you and change my strategy like a couple of times also. So even before joining Curious Core, I went to other boot camps out there, and there weren't a lot of career support. But right now it's so easy to get a mentor through ADPlist, through LinkedIn or wherever, where you would just reach out to people, you network with people, and you really understand their experiences, and try to see how you can learn from it also. So I wasn't really aiming to achieve like the super mentor status, or like being the top 1%. but it's just by helping so many designers get into the field of UX, or like really accelerating their careers in terms of like getting a promotion. So I always had this um, initial thinking of like having this imposter syndrome when I first started, like, oh, who am I to mentor someone? But I kind of changed my perspective of it in terms of like seeing it in that way. I see it as like, oh, I have this kind of experiences that I can share with someone. Maybe they are going through a similar pathway as me. Maybe, you know, they have like similar background as me, and they can learn from, you know, how I experience, you know, or like my pathway as a designer. So that was why I started mentorship. Yeah, it wasn't really to aim to achieve like a super mentor status.
Yeah, totally. And I think because of the fact that you've mentored so many people, I'm very curious about what you're observing from portfolios of people who are switching into the UX industry, or people who are like junior UX designers. What do you notice are some of the common mistakes in this portfolio or in their profile?
I think for common mistakes wise, I don't think it's really a common mistake, but this is what a lot of boot camps are teaching in terms of like having a linear process, having a very cookie cutter kind of process. But in real world, when you come out of a boot camp, it doesn't work that way. So it doesn't go through the 5 design thinking stages. It doesn't necessarily, you know, you have to face very ambiguous kind of situations. So you really need to uh, adapt and to really find something that fits your situation. A lot of times I see a lot of new designers forcing their ideas or solutions. And you can see it through the process, because like they have a solution in mind already, just that they didn't think it through in between, and they are forcing, you know, oh, I need to do user research. And the user research always will force in that direction of how they think, or the end solution that they have in mind. Or like even when they do, you know, prototyping, they already have that image of what they want to design, and it's just very biased in that sense. And you can see from their research, it doesn't have that bridge or link towards their end design decisions. So I mean, that's some of the things that I've been seeing, because we have been learning from boot camps or like from schools that, oh, we need to, you know, do the 5 design thinking stages. But yeah, there's a lot of times you need to think outside of this 5 design thinking stages. So even like just now I mentioned, being a product designer, you need to think of like some of the metrics or like, you know, business impacts that your product have. You know, as a designer, you are not just designing great experiences, you're also designing for your business, right? Without the business, without your product, you know, you even how well you have these experiences, yeah, it doesn't really matter anymore. Yeah, so in that sense, it's really seeing things as a whole rather than breaking it down, having a linear process. So that's what are some of the common mistakes, or more commonly known mistakes when going through a portfolio.
We have a related question from the audience. Natasha asked, like, you know, there's a lot of designers out there. How do I kind of stand out from these designers? You know, like, how do I show my creativity? How do I let my ideas or design solutions stand out? Yeah.
I think like what I mentioned, what impacts, what does your product impact, you know? How does it impact the business? How does it, you know, reach product goals or like design goals that you have initially state? You know, what are some of the success metrics that you have? On top of that, it's really about showcasing what kind of impact you have as a designer, understanding what kind of companies that you're going into, and then those companies have different types of designers that they want to hire. So let's say if Daylan's hiring someone that is you know, more a business kind of UX strategy kind of designer. So if you are showing the 5 design thinking process, it doesn't work on him because maybe he's looking at how you can value add as a designer in terms of like what kind of impact it will bring to the business. So you need to really adapt and to see who you're interviewing with, who you want to join, and what are they looking out for, and really see how you can present your portfolio in that sense of like, or what kind of impact or value I bring to your company.
Thank you for sharing. And I know that before you landed on Xendit, like you had a period of time where you were just trying your best to kind of like really land on a role. I was wondering, I know you made some mental breakthroughs, but I'm also curious, like what were the things you did or adjust in order for yourself to kind of land a role in a hyper growth startup?
Oh, that's quite long ago.
I know, I'm asking you to think back 1.5 years.
Yeah, so I think for me, what I did, I did a lot of tweakings in terms of like the way I look for jobs, in terms of like the strategy I approach finding a job. So the way I connect with people, the way I network, it's a lot different also. In terms of like tweaks on my portfolio, I see what works for different companies. I learn from different designers out there. I go through a lot of mentorship sessions also to reiterate on my portfolio. There's no one proper way to go about designing a portfolio. Like even for junior designers, mid designers, they have very different portfolios out there. Like if you see senior designers, they don't even showcase a lot of their 5 design thinking stages. It's more towards like showing like what they have and what does it impact in terms of like their design decisions. So yeah, I mean, I did a lot of reiterations on my portfolio to get to a hyper growth startup. Yeah.
And I think that's really, really great, because I think you're actually practicing what you said, right? Like earlier, say like Julie Zhuo said, the best way to improve your product thinking is by observing and asking why. And you applied the same process to your own portfolio. You observe and you ask why. Why am I not getting the results? And then you make certain adjustments. So really classic example. Someone over here asked, do you have to pick up any tech development skills, development front-end tech skills in order to communicate better with your engineering team? Yeah.
I think for us, we don't necessarily need to know a lot of the tech knowledge, but it's a plus for us to know because, yeah, talking to tech leads or developers, it's a lot easier if you know the technical terms. It's a lot easier to, run your sprints. But at the same time, as designers, we are more focused on, pushing the user experience or like, giving the product strategy or like, working with PMs very closely. I think PMs are there to be that communicator also between designers and tech people. So yeah, it's not necessary we need to know like the technical terms or like, any technical knowledge, but unless you're working on a very technical product that requires you to understand like, for example, API products. So there's a lot more technical knowledge that you need to brush up on because you are designing for developers, for example. Yeah, so I think it really depends on situation. But in terms of like running, in terms of like during the sprints and all, I think the PM is there to help facilitate everything also. You're muted, David.
Thank you. So I think one point you brought across that was very apt was you mentioned it really depends on the product that you're building, right? Especially how technology focused your product is. If it's not too technology focused, maybe you can skip that phase. But if it's very, very tech focused, like even if you, let's say your product is like AI based, and even if you know nothing about AI, you should also learn how it works in order to build a better product.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, there is a scenario-based question from one of your juniors. Let's say you're the first hire as a product designer in a tech startup, and there's currently no proper design process or framework, which creates a lot of back and forth and misalignment within different teams. I guess his question is like, what would you do, right? He's suggesting a documentation for everyone to follow. But what would you do in this case if there's no process or framework yet? Sounds a lot like when you're working on a team of one.
I think like what I mentioned just now, set expectations to your different stakeholders. I think that's very important. Communicate how do you usually work as a designer? How do you work with PMs? How do you work with tech people? That will help, let them understand, your day-to-day, what do you do, and your processes in terms of like how do you go about thinking of designing a solution for your product. But at the same time, because the design maturity level is relatively low, if you're saying like, oh, there's no proper design process, there's no proper framework, I think it's an opportunity for you to go ahead and try new different frameworks that fit your product. Benchmark with different companies out there in terms of like how are they doing it in different companies, and like I mentioned, learn from other experiences from other designers in terms of like how they run their design team, and slowly you will find ways to build that maturity level in your company, and that's where you slowly gain trust with your upper management, and then you can do a lot more from there. Yeah.
I want to double down on what Justin said on the trust part. I think that is super important. Like if you don't have trust with anyone you work with, it doesn't matter what kind of process you set, no one will follow it. Yeah. So I think that's something to think about. How do you build trust first, and how do you build trust quickly with your team? So let's go back to mentorship and mentoring. Like what if someone were to come to you and to ask you for mentorship, what kind of people would you like to mentor more, or what kind of people you enjoy mentoring?
I think for me, I don't really filter out who I want to mentor, but I think who I enjoy mentoring, it's really having that long-term relationship with my mentees. And also in terms of like seeing how they are very passionate about design and how they want to grow as designers. I think that is someone that I really look forward in terms of like speaking to, or like helping them grow their career. So I think that's how I see mentorship in terms of like my mentees.
I think it's great because you're giving back so much, and I've also directed quite a number of people to you, because after they graduate, I just say, go look for your senior, Justin. So thank you for taking them under your wing and helping them out. Like it kind of works out some of the kinks as well. Someone asked a related question, like, do you think every designer needs a mentor, and do design leaders all design leaders should mentor other people?
Yeah, I think in terms of like I wouldn't say just designers, but I think everyone needs a mentor. It can be a life mentor, it can be a career mentor, it can be your industry mentor kind of thing. I think it's a lot better to have a mentor to try figuring out on your own, because people have been there, people have experienced that process before. Why go through the hassle of going through the same challenges when you can just ask how to go about doing it, or like how can you grow as a designer. So yeah, I mean, in terms of mentorship, I have like career coach, I have like my design mentors, I have people who are my life mentors. So it's not just about having mentors for design, but more towards like how you go about approaching growth, or like have that growth mindset to continuously grow yourself. Because it's a lot easier working with someone else rather than working alone. Yeah, in terms of like design leaders should be mentor or not, I don't think all design leaders should be mentor. It really depends on their interest, whether they have interest in mentoring others. If they are comfortable even like, you know, interacting with a mentee. Yeah, so they can be, you know, the best at their work, but they can also be, you know, not very good at mentorship. So yeah, I mean, it really depends on each individual, whether they want to, you know, share their experiences or they want to be a mentor.
Yeah, I think it's super important to have the heart for it, because if you don't have the heart for it, you won't do it for a long time. But I also feel like the fact that you're mentoring early in your career, your UX career, also gives you an advantage in future to be a manager, right?
Yeah.
Because you've really proven to others, hey, you have the ability to mentor other people and help them get better. So it's actually quite a good pool of evidence that you're kind of building. So that's really great. I'm just wondering, for our listeners and our audience out there, do you have any advice for your mentees and also like your would-be mentees, or even to the general public who's listening to this at the moment?
I would say stay curious, have a growth mindset. Yeah, be more open to meet new people, network around. I think being new in the industry, it's also a pro in that sense that people won't judge you as much, you know. So what if you reach out to people and they don't connect with you? It doesn't really matter, right? Yeah, there's nothing for you to lose in that sense. So continuously, you know, reach out to people, start networking, start, you know, finding mentors, and really have that growth mindset.
I do remember you're not much of an extrovert, if I
Yeah,
remember.
I'm actually quite an introvert.
So I want to ask you to kind of elaborate a little bit, like for those of us who are introverts here, you know, what advice? Because you're asking me, hey, go network. Then like every bone in my body is saying I don't want to network. So what advice do you have for the introverts?
I think there's different ways to approach networking, right? It can not be on a face-to-face basis. It can be through LinkedIn. It can be through a friend kind of thing, or like a referral from, you know, let's say I asked Dylan for if he knows someone in the field. So it's really about really putting yourself out there and really finding the right people to guide you along the way. I force myself to network, so it's a very different thing for me, because I know it will help me in terms of like my career growth. It will help me as a designer. So yeah, I mean that's straight off, right?
I think there is, and I'm sure you found a way to kind of convince yourself and and to manage it in a way that you at least find enjoyable to do. And I think the key here is actually consistency, right? It's not so much like, hey, you know, like be extrovert for 1 week and just get it going, but actually it is like something you need to do quite consistently. And even something like mentoring, I think that's a way of networking as well, right? It's like you're offering your time and you're also opening up your world to other people. So, and I believe ADPlist, when you join as a mentor, you get a chance to network with the other mentors as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of opportunities to network. I think being a mentor also accelerate my career a lot in terms of like not just, you know, in the future you're becoming a manager, but you're learning so many different problems from your mentees. You're finding different solutions for them, or like, you know, if you can clear their blocker, you're like applying that in your own, you know,
Experience.
workspace also. So in that sense, you can really learn from your mentees also. So there's nothing to lose becoming a mentor. For me, I feel.
I love that. And I love the advice about staying curious, because that is what we're all about. Curious call. So thank you so much for taking the time off to share your wisdom and your learnings from the last 1.5 years. And I definitely wish you well in your career, see a lot of potential for growth. And I think a lot of people are interested to reach out to you for mentorship now, as I'm looking at the chat at the moment. So what's the best way to do that? Is it LinkedIn?
Yeah, they can connect with me on LinkedIn or find me through ADPlist. Either one is fine. I will just drop my LinkedIn on.
Excellent. All right. So thank you so much, Justin, for your time. And thank you everyone for listening in and also attending this live webinar event. Next month, we'll also have another guest coming in to share about his or her work experience on working in UX design. And for those of you who are new to this episode, we are about designers working in the Asia Pacific region. Right. So if you have anyone you'd like to recommend, just feel free to ask them to reach out to me or just come reach out to me on LinkedIn. And meanwhile, I hope you learned something new today, and all the best. And we'll see you in the next episode and the next session. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.